Thank you. Terry, is there anyone in here who doesn't know who you are?
Hi guys, Terry Banks, Crane Morley, automotive director. We did a project last year, and it's got a lot of really good stuff, and we're looking forward to see how it's evolved, and as we continue to think about projects we can apply it to.
All right. Thank you.
Troy, we'll just kind of go through our team first, I guess.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
There we go. I am Troy. I'm the director of instructional design at Crane Morley, and have a lot of experience in e-learning and mixed reality tools and virtual reality tools. So I'm really excited to learn how this platform works and get our hands dirty and see what we can accomplish with it. And thank you for running this for us, and also thank you for recording it. So happy. Please share the recording so I can spread the good word around after this. Thank you.
Yeah, real quick, Tom Pratt, president. I think I've met most of you, so you probably already know me.
Thank you.
I'll go for our side. I'm sorry that you can't see me. My camera is not, it's failing for this meeting. But my name is Jonathan Carr. I'm with Envision Innovative Solutions. We have a R&D team, mostly centered around extended reality development. Here with me today is Jeffrey Meacham and William Markry, and I don't think Demeter has made it yet. He might drop in, but if this is recorded, that's fine. But yeah, we're excited to see the platform.
Excellent. Just joining us is our founder and CEO, Raj. So yeah.
Hey, Chris. Hi, everyone. I'm just popping in, listen in for a while, but I have to be in other meeting and also a bunch of tasks. Okay, so thank you all for coming.
All right. Sorry about that if I cut anyone off. Okay. So with that, the first thing is that this is meant to be an interactive tutorial where users are able to follow along with the process. Before we move on with that, has everyone, or is there anyone who has not already gone to our website and downloaded the software? I'm going to suspect that there are a few.
I have not downloaded the software.
Okay. So what I'd like you to do is just follow with these steps, and I'll paste the link in here. Go to our website, siminsights.com, and if you click on pricing, you'll be taken to this page. And right for the purposes of this tutorial, if you click this Try Now button for the $0, you'll be redirected to sign up. If you have not already created an account with us, feel free to do so. I'll log out for a moment so that you can see what that sign-in page looks like. Okay, and here you'll see this login or sign up page. If you click sign up, you sign up with Google, or you can just type in a username and password combination. And once you have done so, you'll be taken to this page. Now, if you are unable to download anything, you can go through this process on the web. It functions perfectly fine that way. However, there's a little bit delay in the loading time as it's limited based on what browser you're using. Otherwise, you're going to click this download for Windows button, which will download our application, which you can extract here, and the version will be 1.46.0. Okay. So that is the process in order to get the trial version of the application. After the application is downloaded, the first time you launch it, you will see this. you can tell what version of the application that you have in the lower left-hand corner down here. And you'll see the same login page as you did when you had the sign up. Okay. So that is the process in order to get our application, and while you guys are downloading that, I'll just keep moving forward with just covering some basics of here, of how it's going forward. Are there any questions though before I move on? All right, thank you. So to start, you're going to want to, when you get to this screen, you're going to want to log in with the same credentials you used to sign up. In my case, it's going to be training@siminsights.com with the password I put in. Once I'm logged in, it'll load me into the page, and this will be the home screen. It'll give you a welcome message with the name of your account that you have, in this case, training. And you'll see a few things on the home page. Now we're going to be spending most of our time in the Simulations tab for creation, but there are a few things I'd just like to point out for moving forward. So if you have simulations that are given to you via a PIN code, which is a method of sharing with users where you don't necessarily know which, or know the account of the user who you want to share it with, but you want to share it with a large group of people, this is a method of sharing that will let you securely distribute your simulation to others. If you need to contact an expert, such as myself or other members of our team, this button here is available, or contacting sales if you want to upgrade your platform or solutions to incorporate some of the paid features of Hyperskill, or purchase a subscription to get off the trial license that I had you go through for this process. This would be how you get there. In the upper right-hand corner are these three dots, which is where you can report a bug, upload various media, give feedback, log out, or exit the application. Down here are some sample simulations that you're able to experience or go through on desktop, which are just going through here, and we're adding to these all the time, which showcase various features or interactions within our system and simulations that were created with our system. Over here is the Virtual Objects tab. This is where you are able to go in and either upload, edit, or change assets that you yourself have uploaded to our repository. I'm just going to quickly hop in here. Right here I have one object. It currently does not have a thumbnail, but if I wanted to add one, I would do so with this Update Thumbnail feature. I'm able to share it with this icon here, delete it from my repository here, or edit it from this button here. So I can look at my virtual objects, my people, or my spaces, and whether ones that I have personally uploaded or ones that have been shared with me here. And you can access the tutorial videos explaining all of this process and how you would utilize this function within this page right here. Okay. Now I'm going to pause here and just confirm, is there anyone who has not yet managed to install the application and get to this home screen by logging in?
I'm still having issues logging in.
Excellent. Where are you at with the process at this point?
I have the app installed and I'm trying to enter my credentials.
Okay. Are you having difficulty?
Yes, I used a suggested password and I didn't realize copy and paste wouldn't work.
I see. Do you need assistance, or have you figured it out at this point?
I'll figure it out in a minute. I just need a minute to log in.
No worries. Is there anyone else who is having difficulties reaching the screen at this time? Excellent.
Just to jump in, so Jeffrey, you can also log in with Google and the others login methods, right? You're trying to create a new account using email ID.
He has successfully created an email account. He has already downloaded the application. He was just not aware that within the application itself, when you are utilizing the login within the application, you can't use paste to input the password. Control-V does not work.
Or the email.
Yes. So you have to type it.
I see.
Oh, why did I do that?
Thanks, Chris.
No worries.
I have to confirm an email before I can log into the app?
No.
All right.
You just need to use the same method you use to sign up in order to log in. So if you did sign up with Google, that's the way you need to log in.
Okay, I come finally in.
Excellent. All right. So
Thank you. Sorry about that.
no worries. It's perfectly understandable. All right. So in order to move forward with creation of our simulations, we're going to click the Simulations page button. Now, yours is going to look very similar to mine, except for yours is going to be completely blank. I have 2 simulations that I have already created previously. I did some cleaning earlier, but I'm just going to quickly walk through some of the features that exist. So in order to create a new simulation, we go to this button here in the upper right-hand corner. What we're going to want to do is we're going to first give the simulation a name, such as my first simulation. And I'm just going to put a date in here for mine so that I don't confuse it with my other one. But you can just call it my first simulation if you'd like. Next, you're able to choose a scenario. This is what environment or space you are initially putting the environment into. The space is not editable by the author. It is the default environment that you are being put into. And you can see that there are some that we have here by default. The one I'd like you to do, if you're following along, is the one called Medical Office Space. It is on the second page. And with that, we're going to hit Create. And that will create your simulation and add it to your list. Now, if you click on your name simulation, there are a few functionalities that become immediately apparent. I will go through them a little bit out of order here. So first, I'm going to start with the second icon here, which lets you copy your simulation. This will make a copy of your simulation in its current state when you press the copy button. Okay, and so here I now have my first simulation 5-3-copy. Over here on the left is an icon that lets you rename your simulation. So if I decided to call this something else, I'm able to change it and it will update the name here. Next is the delete icon. This will let me delete my simulation, removing it from my list. Okay, so it's now gone. Fourth is the share icon. With this, I'm able to type in, or first, I'm able to designate whether I want a user to have viewer permissions or editor permissions within my simulations. I'm able to type in the name of a user who has signed up, who has made an account with our system. So if I do this, it'll send it out. And you can see here who has currently been enabled as a viewer or as an editor. Okay, so I'm just going to undo that for me. What that looks like, if you are trying to get access to simulations that have been shared with you, there's this little check mark up here. When I click that, I can see simulations that have been shared with me. You can tell you're in the Shared tab both by this being selected and by this word shared here. Now, if a simulation has been shared with me, where I have only viewer permissions, and I select it, you can see here the option to rename it is gone, as well as all of the other functions that let me copy, edit, delete it, whatever, and what are in the others. I can only experience the simulation, which is the last button here. Whereas if I have been given editor permissions, like with this simulation here, I still have the edit option and the viewer option, but I'm not able to further share and distribute it or make copies of it. Okay. Now, are there any questions before we move on? Excellent. So what I'd like you to do at this point is on your first simulation, we're going to click the first button here called Edit. And this will load you into the environment and have us be moving forward within it. And you should be seeing the space here. Now, before we move on, this is the scene layout view. You can see what tab you are in up here. You're able to change which view you're in by just clicking up top here. You should see the exact same layout that I have here, except for I have the additional characters, which I can perhaps talk about in a later thing, but this is essentially a paid feature of Hyperskill that you're able to enable through that. But the controls to move around in the scene layout mode have been pasted. I would recommend that you try and familiarize yourself with them because they're going to be very useful to you. So first is the middle mouse wheel. You can scroll to zoom in and out, or you can press down on it as a button to pan the camera around and drag it around within the Y plane. If you hold right click, you're able to rotate the camera. You're able to use W, AS, and D, or the arrow keys, in order to move the camera around in the corresponding direction. So with this, you're able to move about the space freely with going through walls or throughout the entire environment, able to place yourself in whatever environment or location you'd like. This is incredibly useful and necessary when you're laying objects out within your environment. Are there any questions or difficulties that people are having with those controls? Okay. That's a little bit too long of a message, apparently. So, next we're going to be talking about the asset or the controls that you have within this section. So let me just finish pasting that. And there you go. So, first, these are your toolbars, and we will utilize each of these within the creation of the environment. So first is the selection tool. This will let you select an object. I'm just going to place an object within my environment so I can demonstrate the functionality of each of these tools. But we're going to be actually utilizing these within the purpose of creation. So if you have an object in your space and you're on any tool, whether it's a selection tool or not, you are able to select it. However, if you are on specifically the selection tool and you click on empty space, you will deselect it, and you won't accidentally move an object or utilize the functions of the other tool if you're trying to make a selection. So it's very useful for just being precise with what it is you are doing. You're also able to select objects if you have multiple from this section over here. So you can see which object I currently have selected based on the moving axis as well as what is currently highlighted. Next is the XZ movement tool, which lets you move a selected object in the X and Z plane. I can also use it to select an object as such, but I need to be careful because if I'm trying to select this object but I'm holding, I may accidentally be moving an object, which is, again, why the selection tool is very helpful for things like that. Next is the Y movement tool. Yes, Troy?
How do you, because I'm moving around right now in X, Y, Z, how do you separate X versus Y versus Z? Like if I want to only move it up and down on the green axis, can I do that and isolate each axis, or do I have to move all three simultaneously?
So the XZ movement tool does not allow you to move it in the Y. It isolates it in that plane. The Y movement one isolates it only on the Y.
Oh, I see it now. Okay, got it.
Also, you are able to directly input a coordinate
Right.
over here if you want to move it by a specific amount or to a specific location.
Cool,
So
thank you.
you're able to directly do so there. No worries. Feel free to ask any questions. Raising your hand is a very useful feature. I'd appreciate that, actually. But yeah. Next is the rotate tool. This lets you rotate this selected object. Hi, Jeffrey. How can I help you?
Is there an undo if I accidentally moved an object out of the scene?
Not currently. We are expanding our feature set a little bit. That one is very high on our list of priorities to add. Yeah, but what do you mean move it out of the scene?
I accidentally moved it out of the player view. I wanted to move it back in.
I see.
It's fine.
No worries. Alright, next is the rotate tool. This lets you just rotate it in the y-axis. You are also able to type in any values that you specifically want it rotated to, and if you want to rotate it along other axes, you can do so. So you're able to freely adjust the axis that you're rotating it on, like such. Next is the scale tool. This lets you grow or shrink an object based on how you're dragging it. Once you select an object, just move your mouse left to shrink, right to grow, and you can see it shrinking appropriately based off of this information down here. Okay. And last is the delete tool. Once you've selected the delete tool, you can select an object, and it will ask you if you want to delete it. You can make it so that this doesn't pop up for a minute or so after selecting this box, or you can just hit confirm delete. You are also able to delete objects by hitting the X button over here. And so with that, you're able to very easily remove objects from your scene that are no longer wanted or necessary. Last on your list of menus, or I should say next on your list of menus, is the skybox. Now, it's not so important in this simulation here because we're going to be mostly indoors, but from this drop down here, you're able to change what is going on outside in your environment from this drop down. So you can make it blue sky, cloudy, you can put someone in space if you wanted to. You're able to just use the selection here to change what is the most appropriate space for what it is you're trying to accomplish. I'm just going to go with day casual for now. But yeah. Oh, right. Also, if you don't like the axis showing on objects you've put in, you can just hide that by clicking this button here.
Is that similar to locking it?
No, that's just hiding. You can still freely move it along the axes. It's just if you don't like those arrows showing up, you're free to just do that. That's just purely a visual thing.
Can you lock things?
Not currently. In what way would you try to do that? Are you just saying like freeze that object so that it can no longer be adjusted in some way?
Yeah, exactly. Like I imagine you're creating a cluttered small space with a lot of objects, and then once you get it perfect, you lock it, and then you focus on the other objects.
Interesting. Okay. No, that's not a feature that we currently have within our tool set. However, we can certainly add it to our list of things to be developed and added, though. Thank you. Last on the list of tools you have here is the set spawn position. This will set the initial position and orientation of the player when they are introduced into our environment. This is represented by this cube, which is the location, and the arrow is the direction that they are facing. If you click this button, you'll see that it's now attached to my mouse, and if I left click once, it will drop it in place, and it will let me rotate it freely, and when I left click again, it will set the orientation. So with that, I'm able to change the spawn position and orientation of my player when they are entering. I'm going to move this spawn position over to here, which is where I'm going to want to initially place my character facing this way, because this is where I plan on creating the scenario that we're going through today. So, with that, are there any other questions? All right, excellent. So, we've worked a little bit on what these tools are. Now let's actually start utilizing them. So first, we have our asset list here. As I've already demonstrated, you're able to very easily just click over here and an object will be loaded into your environment. If you want to work with objects, you're going to be on the Objects tab. If you want to work with people, which is where we're going to start today, you're going to click on this little icon here, and you'll see that it will load in the individuals that we have. You're able to access your own private repository or shared repository by hitting this dropdown for either the objects or the characters, but as you have new accounts, those are likely empty at this time. So the two characters I would like you to bring in are Blue Dress Mary _light and Dr. Arnold _light. And they are brought in the same way objects are. You're going to click on them, and they'll be brought into your space. Okay. So with that, you're able to just very easily drop them in place, and you're able to manipulate them in all the same ways that you were an object. I just like solid values, so I'm going to just put them in like such. But you're able to freely manipulate them as you were any other object. Okay, and I'm just going to want them facing each other for the conversation we're going to have them having in front of us. And we're going to be interacting with them. Okay. Are there any questions about placing virtual people within the environment? Excellent. So next, I'm going to go back to the Assets tab, or the Virtual Objects tab, and I'm going to bring in some objects to place within my environment to make it so that it's not just myself in an empty room with 2 people. So this is where you're just able to populate things, and you're able to search within the Search tab up here to limit what objects show up. So if I type in a table, you can see it's going to limit this to the table objects I have within here. So I'm just going to put this corner table, for example, over here in this corner. I'm going to rotate it to where it's like such. And I'm going to be able to then just nice and easily slide it into my corner. Okay. Next, if I type in monitor, I have some computer monitors and others to select from here. I'm just going to select this monitor here. And I'm going to orient it on my table and set it down on it nicely like such. Okay. And I'm able to manipulate that in whatever way I'm happy with. Okay. And from here, you're just able to grab whatever object you feel would make your space nice, or look like it's lived in, or anything else, and you're able to arrange it freely. Now, some spaces, we recommend that you keep your spaces more barren and empty, like what you see here, so that I, as an author, am able to populate it freely and reuse an environment for whatever needs or purposes I have. However, it is entirely possible to have spaces come pre-populated with assets. An example would be we have various examples within our scenario, but that does mean that you are limiting its use and functionality to only be with what you designed, whereas if you do it where it's like this, you're able to bring in the staging or necessary assets to allow you to reuse any space and environment for a variety of purposes rather than perhaps one individual one. However, there is no real wrong way to do it. It's just how you want to get the most use out of your assets. Are there any questions?
Yes, I had a question. I'm sorry, I had to step out for a minute.
No.
Is there a way to import a more complex, like let's say I have an object that's multiple pieces, like it's an assembly or something.
Mhm.
Is there a way to bring in like a nested object, like has multiple parts?
I could take this one, Chris.
Thank you.
There's a couple different ways to do it. If you're asking if we can bring groups of assets and arrange those groups in Hyperscale, we don't currently have that functionality. But if you're preparing your assets in Unity, you can absolutely separate a single asset into multiple game object parts and manipulate them in Unity to do what you want them to do and upload it that way. Hyperscale has no problem with that. We'll take it and say, you have different materials on 2 different parts of a single piece. That's totally fine. Hyperscale has no problem with it. Now, if you want to rotate them or interact with them or set up triggers with them in Hyperscale, you will only be able to use the top level that you import in. Does that make sense, Jeffrey?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
All right. Thank you so much, Neil.
Is there an indicator, a visual indicator of when objects are colliding? Like if I'm dragging the desk into the monitor, could it highlight to indicate that they're overlapping, or is that just I have to use my eye for that?
Currently, you'd have to use your eye for that.
Okay.
When you first bring in an object, it will do its best to try and put itself on top of objects rather than let you freely manipulate them. But after you've placed an object, that protection is gone. So right now, at this point, I'm able to position the object in whichever way I, as an author, would prefer, as an example.
Final question, or at least for this segment. Is there a way to view like a 4-view view where it's like top, left, right in perspective? Or is it only the single perspective view?
It's only the single perspective view. You're able to manipulate it into whatever format you want, but we don't have any method of locking your views at this time.
I also don't think we have an orthographic camera at the moment, if that's what you're asking, Jeffrey.
That would have been my next question. Thank you.
All right. So next, I'm going to talk about the default properties that exist for every single object. When you first bring in an object, there are some components of it that are universal, such as the position, rotation, and scale of an object, but also whether an object what the mass of an object is. Default is going to be 1 for all of them. Whether an object is visible, static, grabbable, etc. I'm going to briefly cover each of these and what they're used for. There are further details within our documentation, which is available on our website as well. If you have any further questions, I will go over them and answer them in this query, but this is going to be a quick overview. So position, rotation, and scale are rather straightforward, and we've kind of already covered them. But this is just where an object is in space, what its orientation is, and whether or not you are scaling its size in proportion to what it has by default. 111 is the default scale, and you're able to adjust it to make an object bigger or smaller within whatever plane and scale you'd like. Mass is how heavy an object is, or really how much force is required to make an object move. For a player picking it up, it does not affect them in any way, but it will cause other objects to react differently. If, say, you throw a ball with a mass of 1 into an object with a mass of 100, the object's not going to move. Whereas if you do the inverse, the ball is going to force that object out of the way. So you're able to control a little bit of how objects interact based off of adjusting their mass. Next is visible. This does not affect anything in the edit view, so even if I'm changing the way or this toggle for Mary at this moment. But once I run the simulation, if I put an object in my space that is not visible, it will not be rendered and be not interactable until perhaps something in my simulation has made that object visible to me at a later time. This is incredibly useful if you are trying to hide interactions or individuals. So as an example, if I wanted Dr. Arnold to not be in our environment and be introduced later based off of my sequence of events, I probably have him be not visible initially, and only after he has been introduced into the scene would I have him be visible and loaded in, and then begin performing his actions. Next is the isStatic variable. Now, if you're familiar with Unity, this is the same thing as isKinematic, but this is whether an object is affected by physics or not. An object that is static will float in the air upon release and essentially has an infinite mass and cannot be moved by any other object. So that's just how that behaves. The grabbable and functionalities of that is determined whether an object can be grabbed or not based off of this selection here. If an object is grabbable, it will behave based on its grab type properties as listed here. I didn't define that. So, if an object is grabbable and is of the basic type, it'll just go into your hand as you would expect. And then there are a few others which I'm not going to cover within this behavior, but essentially if it wants to behave like a drawer where it slides, you're going to use this type. If it or the slider type. If it behaves like a wheel, you're going to want to use the rotator type. If you want it to be dragged along the floor, like say a cart, it would be of the dragger type. And if you want to use it as the object to pick up other objects, so it becomes your modality of grabbing things, it would be of the grabber type. So that is the basics of the grab mechanics. And if you want to do an offset from how it is grabbed or orientate it, you would use the position offset or rotation offset. And the last functionality that are the basics here is the snap type. This lets you attach 2 different objects together in a specific location and orientation. So if I were to take my cube, or So if I were to put a cube in here, and I wanted to attach my trash bin to my blue cube for some reason, I'd be able to do so with the hitboxes. One moment. Okay, so you can see I have some locations to find on that cube. So if I wanted to, I could attach the trash bin to the top of it. So where if I were to grab the blue cube, the trash bin would, or move the blue cube, the trash bin would move with it in this case. Whereas if I were to grab the trash bin, it would move independently of the blue cube because that's just the hierarchy of which I've attached it. Okay. Hi, Troy. How can I help you?
Can you duplicate copy paste objects? So if I bring in, for example, that trash bin and I resize it or I do something with it and I give it certain statuses, so I affect its mass or things like that, and then can I copy paste it and it retains all of those characteristics?
Not currently.
Okay.
Okay. So that covers all of the default attributes of objects. I'm not going to go into this too much, but you're also able to add customizable attributes to objects. So if you're on the default and you click on this customizable, you're able to do this for any virtual object. You're able to create a custom attribute. You're able to give it a name. By default, it will just create an attribute value of the number of attributes you currently have. You're able to choose the type based off of this selection here. By putting in a value here, you're able to utilize this to leverage other functionalities that are not going to be possible when only utilizing the default attributes. All right. Are there any questions about objects and their attributes and how they're utilized within the simulation?
I have a question.
Absolutely.
Can the characters be moved? Like, can you have their arms move, or are they just kind of static?
Yes.
Yes to what?
You are able to animate them and
Okay.
have them do various actions that we have defined as necessary within our simulation, and you're also able, yes is the short answer, and I'll be covering parts of that as we go forward. They are not static.
Right.
But that would be going into the next part of the lesson, which is the scenario flow tab, which I will be going into in a minute. Is there any other questions? Okay. Last on the list of things to cover here is this little drop down here for virtual objects and player. Sometimes players will have attributes. Now, by default, there is the controller type. This will only affect virtual reality experiences. We're able to change what the controller appears on default, or appears as on default when loaded in. So if you want them to have the base controller, that is the default, but you're able to change what it is, whether it's a work glove, medical gloves, or various skin tones for male or female hands from this drop down here. And if there are attributes that are specific to a player, you're able to create them the same as any other custom attribute.
Can the user change the controller type on their end? So if I have users who have like if I have clients who, like, I'm going to give this to a client, can they change it to match their skin tone? Or would that not be an option?
So what you would do as an author, you would create some kind of method of interaction. I'm going to very quickly do so, if you don't mind. A little bit ahead of me, but that's okay. I'll cover what I'm doing right now, or what I'm doing now in a later portion. Just understand I'm going a little bit quickly to answer your question. So let's go with when the player does this interaction, I want that player their controller to be changed to whatever this is. So, for example, if I have a panel that says, hey, select your skin tone and your gender, right? It will allow them to change it to whatever I choose, or to whatever their selection entails.
And if I can chime in for 1 second, Chris, we are working on a more unified feature set there in terms of when the user is loading into the simulation the first time, just having an option to choose. So you don't have to go through this hassle, but that is still in the works.
Okay. So with that, that does cover everything that we're going to be doing within the scene layout tab. Next, we're going to be moving into the scenario flow, which is going to be where you are going to be defining the primary method of experience within your simulation. Before we do that, though, there's a few things that I'd like us to do so that you can be familiar with the experience mode. So first, I'd like you to go to Settings. I'd like you to click this Enable Microphone Input. On the settings page, you're able to change some behaviors of what's going on within your simulation. The most important one to us, again, is enabling the microphone input. But if you want your simulation to be one where players aren't walking around, they're stationary, you're able to restrict the player movement with this button here. If there are documentation that you need to be added in here, whether it's a PDF or a Word document, you would add it here. And you're able to generalize the voice of the virtual assistant if one is present, as well as select an actor to embody that virtual assistant voice here. There are a lot of information that you're able to put in here based off of what you have here, but what is the only one we're going to be leveraging here is the enabling microphone input. If you have any questions about what any of these do, feel free to ask, but it is also covered within our documentation. If there are
I have
platforms...
one.
Sure.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were done. I'll wait till you're done.
Okay, sure. If there are any platform-specific changes that are necessary for you here, to where you need to behave differently or enable features that are only available on specific platforms, you would do so down here. Such as on desktop, allowing you to fly around freely rather than being attached to the ground so that your camera behavior is much more similar to what you have here in this edit mode, rather than being attached to the ground, walking along it. I'll take a question now.
Notice that your window, the app by default opens in full screen. How do you switch it to work in windowed mode? Because I have a Word doc I'm keeping notes in, and I want to just have them side by side.
You know, I was wondering if anyone would run into that. So you're able to toggle whether it's in full screen mode or being able to be windowed by pressing Alt and Enter if you're on Windows, or Command F if you're on Mac.
Thank you so much.
No worries.
That saves a lot of headache.
Yes, I'm aware. I'm sorry that it does that by default, but that has to do with a download preference settings somewhere deep within your Windows setup. Anyway. But yeah. So that is the settings tab and what was important, just enable this microphone input. And with that, we're going to hit this save button in the upper right hand corner. Now, if you make your simulation public, all that this does is it generates a web URL and allows you to utilize the pin code functionality, where if it's not selected, you're not going to be able to add it to the pin code system, and it will not automatically generate a web URL. So with that, I'm just going to hit save here. I'm just going to say save successful. I'm able to export this to SCORM, which is, if you have a logging system that is not within Hyperscale, you're able to help set up this link through this. You're able to copy this web link here and paste it in to any web or into a Chrome web browser, and it will begin loading the experience. Or you can just hit play, and that will launch it in desktop. Okay, I'm going to be simultaneously launching both. But when your simulation is launched, for your first time, or for any time thereafter, you're going to see this control scheme. This informs you of how to behave within Hyperscale on the desktop version of the application, and the controls are going to be present within all of them. or consistent between all of them. If you hit start simulation, it will load us into our environment. Okay. In the upper right hand corner, you can see those same controls iterated, which you can show or hide by hitting this button here. And there's a text field here which you can show or hide, as well as type into if necessary when the microphone is enabled. Okay. Now currently we haven't set up any voice intent, so although it is interpreting me as trying to say hello there, the system is not listening for any intent, so it's going to just give you a message of, hey, I didn't recognize that, please try again. I'm able to toggle the microphone input by either clicking on the microphone, and you can see it's doing its best to transcribe what it is I am saying, or I can press the left tab key to toggle that on or off. Okay, I'm just going to hide that for now. You can also open the pause menu again by hitting the pause button down there, which will just bring you back to this screen here. You have the settings tab, which will change the volume of your simulation, as well as your mouse sensitivity and any other settings you have within the system. And then help will just bring up this page again. All right. Oh, right. On web, it's the same interface. It'll load me in, and it's the same simulation as what we have created thus far, with a slightly different sensitivity because my settings on here are a little bit different. But yeah. Now, in order to walk around, the controls are as listed, but I will paste them in the chat regardless. Where it's just WASD to move, or the arrow keys, we have taken these controls from video games and other different methods of interaction. We did not come up with this ourselves, but this is how you're able to move it along. And if you have a preference in the way your controls function, you can go to Settings and change your player movement from strafe to rotation, which will change your A and D keys from moving to rotating your camera, if that is preferable to you. I personally prefer strafe, but that is a user preference. All right, so with that, we don't currently have any interactions within our environment, but you're able to walk around it based on how you've laid everything out. Okay, are there any questions? Okay, so with that, we're going to hit the quit button in the lower left-hand corner and be returned back to our authoring scene. And we're going to get into our scenario flow and begin creating the actual behaviors of our environment and scenario, following a flow so that we're able to interact with our environment. This is essentially us creating the brains and reactions of the behavior. So, in order to do that, you're going to go to the Scenario Flow tab by just clicking here, and you'll be brought to this screen. Now you're able to zoom in and out with your mouse wheel. Be more obvious if I put it a state down, to see whatever it is you're working on. You're able to create new states by hitting this plus state button in the upper left-hand corner, or by right-clicking within the environment and hitting the Add State button. Okay. Now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to create a total of 5 state actions within your environment and lay them out left to right with a small gap in between them, because we're going to be linking them at some point. Oh, right. Within the state machine controls, you can move the screen around with your middle mouse wheel button by clicking with it and dragging, or you can switch to the movement tool, which will let you left click to move in here, but you're going to want to go back to the selection tool for actual creation. Okay, so we want to create states 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Yes. Okay. Now, with your states created, you're able to name them whatever you would like. In this case, I'm just going to name this one Introduction. You can see here, I'm able to make that name change here, and I'm able to call these whatever I find most appropriate. I'm going to leave them as they are for now, but it is going to be helpful for you to use this as a note-taking system or just a general description of what's going to be contained within each of these. All right. So, next, we're going to talk about how to populate what is in each of these sections. So, before I move on, is there any questions about creating states within the scenario flow environment? Okay. So, within what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to click on a state. You can see which one you currently have selected based on the blue outline. We're going to start with what is either state 0 or the one I've renamed to Introduction. You can see which state you've currently selected in the upper right-hand corner here based on what is written here. So if I change that, I'm able to see which one I have selected. Now, within this drop-down here, these are all the actions that could potentially be put in to the simulation to behave in a specific way. Now, I am not going to spend the time to go through all of these, but I will outline the ones that we will specifically going through. And because you asked about controlling your virtual people, you would do so via the animation controller as an example if you wanted them to do a specific act. Wait, sorry, play animation. Yes. Virtual person, Dr. Arnold. So if you wanted Dr. Arnold to do various behaviors, here's how you could do so. So if I wanted him to walk around in a specific area, I could do so with this. Okay, as an example. Now the one I'd like you to start with, though, is display message. So you're going to hit this drop down and scroll down to display message, and then you're going to hit this create button here. This will create a display message. And you can see here that it has been populated under my introduction tab, and it is as a little green indicator on the left, as well as the name of what action is being done, and a little arrow thingy here that will let you manipulate where it is within the environment, or let you reorder it. So if I were to create a highlight one, I could reorder these here, as an example. All right. So, in order to create content for a display message, I'm going to paste in the following. Welcome to a simulation. Here we present with a conversation among your colleagues. Walk in closer, listen, observe carefully, and respond. Now, a display message is just information that I'm giving to the player, which on desktop is going to appear in front of their screen and be able to just serve the purpose of giving information to them. I'm not expecting them to respond to this specifically in this case. I'm able to further customize how this appears to the user by giving it a header or giving it button text. I believe by default it just says OK, and the header by default is notification. So if I give it the header of introduction as an example, and a button text of I understand, and I were to just immediately launch my simulation as such, you'll see that before where nothing showed up for me as a user, I now am greeted with this message here, where my top part here says introduction, and I have the text, and the button says I understand. Okay, so that's just kind of how that functions. Now, sometimes, although not in this case, you're going to want your instructions to rather than being anchored to the player, you're going to want them somewhere in space. You're able to define that location by typing in these coordinates and giving it an orientation with this rotation here, which will put it in your environment rather than putting it directly in front of the player. Hi, Troy. How can I help you?
Within the environment, or within the app running as the end user, could they toggle that? So you can give them the option of it being anchored, or they can hit a button to then have it switch to a, like, if the instructions were on the wall, for example, in space, and then they move around, they can hit a button to make it anchored to them. Like, do they have that ability to, or could you give them that ability to toggle that?
Yeah. So that is a feature we are currently developing in VR. It should be available shortly. In desktop, not so much. But yeah, I'm going to keep it anchor for now. And lastly is the display type. So some instructions you want to be displayed only, which is where you have only that text. Some you want it to just be a verbal instruction, and some you want it to be both, where the instruction shows up in front of the user as I showed you before, and read out loud. Now, I'm going to have this be displayed and spoken, and we're going to use our text-to-speech system, but you're also able to upload and record your own audio and utilize that uploaded audio file in case you wanted to do so. So I could, for example, record myself saying, "Welcome to a simulation," and use that uploaded audio file to play this, or I can use our synthesized text-to-speech option. So from here, I'm just going to select Kendra as my voice, and with that, Kendra, or the voice of Kendra, will read this out loud. Okay. Now, the next function that I'm going to cover is the look at function. So this is primarily for controlling VPs and where their attention is at. So I'm going to create 2 of these because we have 2 VPs. And from here, you're able to control what object, player, or person that the virtual person is currently turning their head towards. So in this case, I want Dr. Arnold to be looking at the virtual person, Mary. And I want him to be looking at her, not stopping looking at her. So this will turn that on, whereas if he was looking at something, clicking this would have him stop. Okay, I'm going to do the same with the inverse, to where I'm going to have Mary looking at the virtual person, Dr. Arnold, and I want her to start doing that. So with this, I'm able to control some of the behaviors of my virtual people. Are there any questions about how you would utilize this functionality? Okay.
Quick question. I'm sorry. Does the look at function work with only Unity rigs, or if I have like a custom rig, will it also?
I'm not quite sure I understand, but what the look at function does, I'm going to have it be on me as a player and just launch the simulation to give a demonstration of how this behaves. What this does is it controls one of the neck bones, essentially, to have the targeted individual, in this case Arnold. So she's set to look at Arnold, and Arnold's set to look at me, to where he's going to do his best to look at me based on my orientation. So behind him, he's not going to turn like an owl, but he will adjust his head based on my orientation. And when I'm within his range of motion of his head, he's actually going to follow me.
I apologize. I missed where you got the lookout from. Is that an animation state transition?
No, that is just a straight up drop down within the behaviors. Give me a moment, I'll return there. So within here, look at is just one of the functions.
Oh, I didn't realize you could scroll down. Okay, gotcha.
No worries.
Thanks.
Yeah, and again, initially I want them to be looking at each other. They will look at the player once we begin interacting with them, but initially I want them looking at each other. All right. Any other questions? Or sorry, did I answer your question about that?
I guess my last question would be, does this also, can I have like an object always look at camera? Like, can I have like let's say I have like an image in the scene, can I have it always oriented towards the player, or is that not that functionality?
Short answer is yes.
Or is,
if I see what you want. Yes, you can, is the short of it. It's a little bit tricky, but yes, you can. You essentially want an inverse angle based off of the player's position. With virtual people, they have that function innately. With objects, you would utilize different functionalities to get that same behavior, essentially. But yes, you can. Yes. So I'm just going to go with yes, you can, and I can create a video demonstrating how it is, but that would take me a little bit of time to create within this scenario. So if that is something specifically that you would like to have incorporated into one of your simulations, I can answer that question for you and give you a demonstration, but that is outside of the scope of this demonstration at this time, if that's okay.
Okay.
All right. Next, we're going to go on to our next state action. So we're going to go to state 1. We're going to click on here, and you're going to see that this is now empty because we haven't created any behaviors within this one. And we're going to utilize some functionality here to have our virtual people begin speaking to each other. So we're going to hit this drop down again, and we're going to scroll down, and we're going to be looking for the speak action. So that's selected, we're going to hit create, and we're going to select our virtual person. In this case, I'm going to go with Blue Dress Mary, and I'm able to select the voice again. You can choose whatever you prefer. I'm just not going to choose Kendra because that's the one we chose already to be that of our system, so I'm going to choose Sally. And you're able to do an animation type here. So if it's random, it can be any of these selected if you don't really care, or it can be none. Selected means that she's always going to behave in a specific behavior or fashion, but we're going to do none for now. And wait until I finish speaking. If this is not selected, it means that the behavior will go immediately in sequence, one after the other. So for example, if I had this display message as a part of this, and I have this check mark not selected, okay, what would happen is Mary would begin speaking, and this display message would immediately pop up. Whereas if I have this selected, it would wait for Mary to finish speaking, and only when she has finished saying her sentence will this behavior continue moving on. We're going to want the wait until I finish speaking to be done here, because we're going to be having our two users talking with each other, and we don't want them talking over each other while they are speaking. While they are arguing, they're at least going to let each other finish their sentences. All right. So, what I'm going to put in here to the sentence is, well, I think you're discriminating based on my background. Oh, by the way, for the speak action, you can preview what it sounds like by hitting this icon over here. Whatever you typed in will be said based off of what voice you have selected.
Well, I think you're discriminating based on my background.
So you're able to hear it that way with whatever you've typed in. All right. Next, we're going to continue with the flow of the dialogue. So I'm going to go to the speak action. I'm going to create another one. But for this one, the virtual person is going to be Dr. Arnold. For his voice, I'm going to go with Justin. And I'm just going to paste in, most certainly am not. I was merely being honest with my opinion. That report was subpar and you know it.
I most certainly am not. I was merely being honest with my opinion. That report was subpar and you know it.
So I'm able to select this, and I'm just going to go with just random 2. And next would be having her respond again. So Blue Dress Mary, text to speech, the voice of Sally. Selected. And we're going to go with female talk 1, just because I can. And just have it be, that's better than most reports produced in this company. You have a problem when it is my report. Okay, and I'm just going to make sure that I have this wait until finish speaking is selected for all of them. So that way this does happen in sequence rather than trying to get the last word over each other. Now, at the end of here, I'm going to add a display message because I'm going to want the user to interact now, where I'm telling them, hey, you have walked in on this difficult conversation. How would you respond? How would you respond? Okay. And I'm going to have this be displayed and spoken again with my selected voice of Kendra. All right. So with this, I've created my second state action, where I have behaviors expected. They're going to occur in the sequence I've listed, and if I want to reorganize them, I could click and drag them, and you can see it matching that behavior there, but I want to keep it in the behavior or order that we originally had. Are there any questions?
What triggers the, I mean, I'm sure you're about to show this, but what triggers the conversation to initiate between the two people? Is it when you approach them, or do they just start the moment the scene starts?
So based on how it's currently authored, it won't. There is no transition connecting these behaviors. I was going to cover that next, though.
Okay, sorry.
No worries.
I'm setting you up for the next step.
Yeah, wonderful. So, currently, before I get too much further on, I'll go a little bit out of my order. You're able to choose where you start in your simulation based off of this entry state. So wherever your entry state is by default highlighted in a thicker white than the other. We're changing that UX so it's going to be more obvious. But when I click on, say, state 3, you can see that now I'd be starting here. So this is just important. You're going to just leave it where we had it set before, because we want to start here. Now, if you want things to connect to each other, you would do so by either hitting this transition button here. You can see it changes to select origin. If I select the origin, I'll then say select destination. When I do so, it creates this little connection piece here. Okay. So with this, these two nodes are connected, or states are connected. With that, I will go from this one, from the right, or from the left to the right. Okay. If there is nothing in here as a trigger or a condition, it will happen automatically after all actions within the state are complete. If I were to add a trigger, which is what I will be doing here between state 1 and state 2, by the way, another way to create that transition is just right-clicking on it, clicking Add Transition, saves you a click. Okay. So this will let me add a trigger or condition to this from this tab here. So if I click on the piece, it will tell me here. And the one that we're going to want to be using is called the voice intent, but I will go over each of them in a moment. Where now the trigger to move forward is saying a phrase. Okay, so again, a little bit ahead of myself. Is what's going to be in here as well as a few others. Okay, so now in this case, to go from state 1 to state 2, the user would need to say, what is the problem in order to move forward? Okay, I'm just going to move over here to give you a quick run through of all of the triggers because this is important and there's not too many of them. So collide is kind of self-explanatory. If two objects bump into each other, that is the collision event. That's what you're looking for. By the way, you can only have one trigger per transition, but you are able to have multiple transitions from one location to another. So if you wanted multiple ways to get here, but you wanted the trigger to be different for each, you're absolutely able to do so. There is no issue there. You're also able to create branches off of here to where it goes one way if you make this, if you say this statement, and it will go this way if you do another. So that is absolutely within the capabilities of the system. But yeah, that's collide. Grab is if you grab an object, you're going to move forward. Proximity is if two objects or the player gets within a certain range of an object measured in meters. Rejected intent has to do with the user has said a certain number of actions which the system did not understand, and so that intent was rejected by the system, or it didn't know what to do. So after that number has been reached, so if I did this 3 times, it would have me move forward after the system did not understand what the player was trying to say at least 3 times. Okay. Snap is what I talked about before with the trash bin and the cube, where you're able to put, or I should say, attach 2 objects together, kind of like with Velcro or with Legos, and they're able to be put together as such, and you're able to either show that location or hide it based on this, and have various properties with here. Snap is probably the most complicated function within these, and we have videos explaining this interaction specifically. Next is voice intent, which is you're looking for the user to say a phrase or a series of phrases by an utterance, which is the one that I will be going further into detail and populating within this simulation. Ungrab is the user releasing an object that was held. Unsnap is whenever the user takes 2 objects that are connected and separates them. Use is whenever a player uses an object. In the desktop case, it is left-clicking on an object. And use release is when they stop left-clicking an object they were left-clicking on before. And wait is just a period of time has passed. Those are all the default triggers that we have within our system and how they function. Are there any questions about any of the triggers? Okay. Now, the second part of this, which we will not be utilizing in this simulation, but is just something that is available to you, is sometimes just performing the trigger is not enough. You need to be a little bit more complicated and add conditions to it. This is where typically your customizable attributes will come into play. Sometimes not, but you're able to have as many conditions on a trigger as you would like. And what this will cause the behavior to do is require both of them to be true at the time when you're trying to move forward. So in the case of, I don't know, my voice intent, it will only accept my what is the problem intent here if Mary is currently visible, as an example. Or probably a better example of this would be if the computer monitor is currently being held by the user for some reason. I'd be able to utilize this as a simulation condition to where even if they are giving the appropriate intent, it will not be accepted until they've fulfilled some other condition that I've put within the environment. With this, you're able to create rather complex interactions and behaviors that you're expecting from your user and move forward with them. Are there any questions? All right. So with that, that covers what I would be doing with triggers and how you can create connections between your various states. Now, sometimes when you are working with states, you want things to happen when you enter a state and other things that occur only when you leave a state. The way you deal with this is by default you're on the Enter tab, but you can also go on the Exit tab here. You can see that that will hide what I was doing here and allow me to create different behaviors, which will happen when the user leaves this function. So in this case, we are going to have the lookat functions be put here for our two virtual people. And you can see here, when I've added them, they are put to the bottom and are indicated in red on the right-hand side, letting you know that this is happening when you leave the functionality, or when you leave this state, rather than when you enter. So in this case, we're going to have our two VPs begin looking at us, the player, when we do this. So previously, we had them looking at each other. After we give this voice intent, or we're leaving here, we're going to want them looking at us. All right. Are there any questions?
Yes. So we have the look at from the first section. Can we copy and paste those to the another section, or do we have to recreate that each time?
You can copy a state if that's what you want by right-clicking on it and clicking copy. But otherwise, you're going to be recreating the lookat functions as such. But you are able to copy a state and all of its contained behaviors within it, if that's what you prefer.
Can I move a function from enter to exit, or is it always has to be recreated?
It has to be recreated. Okay. Now, admittedly, this simulation is not going to be complex enough to where an exit action is required. Because to be fair, having this as the exit action of state 1 would have the exact same functionality if it was the enter action of state 2. It would behave no differently. However, if I had branching in this case, to where there are multiple ways or places that this could reach to, rather than having the lookat function defined as the first action in all three of these, it's just a lot simpler for me as an author to put them in my exit action right here. So that is the reason why you would probably want to utilize exit actions beyond just organizational reasons. Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay. Next, we're going to go on to state 2. Now here, we're going to add some, sorry about that. We're going to add some dialogue here. So we're going to go to our speak action. We're going to have Dr. Arnold speak to us. And he has the voice of Joey. And do none. I'm going to wait for him to finish speaking. And I'm going to have him say, "None of your business, pal." Okay. Going to add a display message in here, which is going to be displayed and spoken by Kendra, with the voice of, "How would you respond to Adam?" Okay. Now, I'm sorry I forgot about this until now, but I would just like to let you know that you can name your virtual people by clicking on them. And there's a name here that you can type in. So if I just type in the name Mary, and I type in the name Adam here, what this will do is when they speak, on the text on the left for the message, it will append whatever name you have written here to the name that you type in, so it'll show that as their name when they're speaking, which could be very useful to you. Rather than the name Blue Dress Mary _ light or Dr. Arnold _ light. All right. Is there a question?
Sorry, I accidentally tapped my mic.
No worries. All right. So next we're going to add this here. We're going to add another speak action. The virtual person is going to be Arnold with our speech with the voice of Joey. I don't need him doing that. And we're going to wait until he's finished speaking. And we're going to do, why is everyone so nosy around here? Why don't you take a hike? Okay. I'm going to let the user figure out that they're going to respond here, but if you want to, you can add a display message going, how would you respond? With display and spoken in Kendra, just to be consistent. And going back to here, we're going to have the speak action, where we're going to have Mary say, actually, I think you should stay. I would like a third party to be present. Our virtual person is Mary. We're using text-to-speech. We gave her the voice of Sally. I don't need her to animate in any way, and I'm going to just wait until she's finished speaking before I show my display message. Which will be, what is your response? Okay. And again, we're just going display and spoken with the voice Kendra. All right. And lastly, in state 5, we're going to go here, and here we're going to add one little feature, which is show feedback log. Okay, which will show us our performance notes. Now, the feedback log is able to be leveraged to show a lot of information to the user and be called up anytime with this state action. If you have not added anything to the feedback log, it will show you the name of the user, how many times they have reached the point in the simulation where the feedback log has been called up, or how many times it has been completed, as well as any other notes or features that have been implemented by you as the author to the user. I will show you how to add various feedback logs to this, but that is what the default feedback log for performances does. There is one specifically for utterance scoring, which is a different type of feedback log, where you are scoring the utterance and giving different information to the user based off of the other format paneling type. Right now, we're going to keep it on the performance notes type, though. All right. So with that, we will have created 6 nodes, only some of which may be connected or not. And if they're not connected, don't worry, we'll be covering that next, with various behaviors contained within. Are there any questions? All right. So next, we're going to want to connect all of these states together. So just right-click on them and click Add Transition, and just connect them all from left to right. Okay. And with that, you will have them strung together as such. Now, between state 1 and 2, we're going to add a voice indent. So you're going to want to go down to the drop-down here for the triggers and select voice intent, and then hit Create. Next, you're going to hit Edit Utterances. Now, these utterances are what the system is looking for as an example phrase to move over, or to move forward from the given state. The more examples you give, the better that the system is at recognizing similarities between your intent. So for example, what is the problem? What is the matter, guys? Do you think I can help? Is there an argument? And what is happening? So with this, I know for a fact if I say any of these phrases exactly, it will let me move forward. But based off of what version of the chat system I am using, the artificial intelligence is smart enough to recognize what I am doing as an intent to move forward and will expand the list of what is acceptable by the system. So it doesn't need to be these exact phrases per se, but it is able to utilize these as samples to move forward with and educate the AI for moving forward. Are there any questions about that? Okay. You are able to change what version of the natural language engine is using if you have this enabled in your system, which again is a paid feature from the key phrase system to ChatGPT by hitting this drop down here. GPT is better at recognizing things that are similar. The key phrase is able to system is cheaper and faster, but has you stick more strictly to what is contained within the text here. All right. So next, we're going to go to our next transition between state 2 and state 3. We're going to add another voice intent. Here we're going to click Edit Utterances. We're going to add the "you are being extremely rude." Hi, Jonathan. How can I help you?
Hey, I apologize. I have to take a call real quick, but please continue. My team will continue to follow.
No worries. And as said before, we are recording this. I can send it to you when we're done,
Yep.
as well as you have access to the other videos.
Perfect. Okay, thanks.
No problem. All right. That is rude to say. Please stop. And that is inappropriate. So by hitting save here, we've added that to our list of voice intents. I'm just going to paste this in the chat because I think I am going a little bit quickly on adding these. Between state 3 and state 4, we're going to add 2 more. Would you like me to leave? And should I leave? Okay. And last here, going to add various utterances here. We should resolve this. Don't take things too far. And stop arguing. Okay. So with all of this, we have our introduction, which is walking us through what it is we should be doing, where the actors are being staged to look at each other. But after we have dismissed the display message, it's going to automatically just move forward to the next section because we're not looking for any input from the user. Next, we go into our state 1, which is the beginning of our conversation, where the two VPs are arguing with each other. And we are prompted to give a response. After we give our response, the two VPs will begin looking at us. The acceptable responses are listed in this voice intent here of the following: what is happening, is there an argument, etc. After we say that, we have This user respond with none of your business. We let them know that is rude and inappropriate to respond that way. He responds, why are we also nosy? Then we ask Mary if we should leave, and Mary responds to us saying actually they'd like us to stay. And the last thing we can say here is stop arguing, don't take things too far, and we should resolve this. And then we get some performance notes showing us how that moves forward. That is the basic layout of our simulation at this point. Are there any questions? All right. So now, if I hit this play button here, this is the same as hitting save and play simulation from here, but this is just a shortcut if you want to do so to immediately get in there. If I click this button, it will immediately launch us into our simulation. If we experience it now, there will be quite a bit different from where we were last time we did this.
Welcome to a simulation. Here you will be presented with a conversation among your colleagues. Walk in closer to listen. Observe carefully and respond.
Okay.
Well, I think you're discriminating based on my background.
I most certainly am not. I was merely being honest with my opinion. That report was subpar and you know it.
It was better than most reports produced in this company, and yet you have a problem when it is my report.
You have walked in on this difficult conversation. How would you respond?
I just realized my audio is not sharing, is it?
I apologize, Chris. I had to hop into another meeting for like a split second, and when I hopped back, what's the when you're in the I forgot what you call it, the scene, but in the scenario flow, what do you need to put in at the very front to trigger the first task or the first state? Because when I run mine, it doesn't seem to initiate the first box, the first state.
Okay.
Yeah, so do you have to do something to make that one trigger?
So
The
if
introduction?
it was not the first one you created, your entry state is probably different. So
Oh, I
if you
see.
click on this
Okay.
entry state, you probably are starting somewhere else, would be my first guess. So for example, if I change my entry state to state 1, I won't get this display message. They will not begin looking at each other because this only is currently set up to go right to left.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, I'll check that and see if I can fix it. Thanks.
Absolutely. That would be my guess. Let me see if I can share in such a way to where my audio is coming through. I see. That's what I have to do. Thank you, Google Meet, for the way that you function. All right. So I'm going to be launching this in the web because that's the easiest way for me to be sharing my audio. It'll function the same as if I was launching in desktop experience mode, though. Anyway. Might take a little bit longer to load in comparison, but whatever. All right, we're going to start our simulation now.
Welcome to a simulation. Here you will be presented with a conversation among your colleagues. Walk in closer to listen. Observe carefully and respond.
Is the audio coming through?
Yes.
Excellent.
Welcome to a simulation.
Well, I think you are discriminating based on my background.
I most certainly am not. I was merely being honest with my opinion. That report was subpar and you know it.
It was better than most reports produced in this company, and yet you have a problem when it is my report.
You have walked in on this difficult conversation. How would you respond?
Okay, so it's currently looking for my voice input. It's currently turned off based off my settings. I'm able to either type in my response here, which I will do so in this case. So I can just say, what is the problem?
None of your business, pal.
Okay.
How would you respond to Adam?
Or I can talk and it will have the same effect. You are being extremely rude.
Why is everyone so nosy around here? Why don't you take a hike?
How would you respond?
Would you like me to leave? Oh. Would you like me to leave?
Actually, I think you should stay. I would like a third party to be present.
What is your response?
I accidentally turned off my microphone when I wanted it on. We should resolve this. Okay, and here are my results. Currently, I don't have anything in the performance note showing what's going on here, but I'm going to show you how to add those in a minute. But this is what pops up. I'm currently joining by a public ID, so this is what it pops up as. I can rename that to be my name, how many times I've completed it, what the time it took me to do so was, etc. Okay, and that does complete this simulation as far as we currently have it authored. I'm going to pause this and go back to here. Oh, and I need to stop sharing actually, because otherwise you can't see what I'm doing. All right. So that's what we have authored. Are there any questions based off of what was shown there? Based off of how it behaved or anything else?
I have a little issue with my flow still, but I don't want to hijack the meeting to have you debug my situation. So I'll bring that up at the end if there's time.
Absolutely. Okay. So the last functionalities that I wanted to cover, or I would like to outline, is how to add information to that feedback log. So I'm going to start my state 1 here. I can either click here to add a feedback log, which I'm able to type in whatever information for the user, or what's actually going to be valuable to me here, I'm going to start a timer. So there's this start timer function here. And here I'm able to create a timer. So I'm going to call this resolution. And by hitting this plus button here, that will add it to my list. This is just going to be increment, but you can change your timer to be counting down from something, or being counting up. So if you have to reset it, so you can have it be counting down from a value, or you can just have it be increasing from wherever it's at. Okay, and if we go over here to state 4, we're going to do the same thing, because rather than starting timer, we're going to end a timer, and we're going to end our resolution timer. So now if we go through our same simulation again, it's going to have a feedback log at the end saying information for the user, as well as have how much time it took us to complete the simulation, and how much time it took us to reach a resolution. Okay, so that might be valuable to users as you go through it. I'm not going to be sharing my audio through this one. I'm just going to go through this rather quickly so you can see the feedback panel display for it.
Welcome.
Well, I think you're discriminating based on my background.
I most certainly am not. I was merely being honest with my opinion. That report was subpar and you know it.
It was better than most reports produced in this company, and yet you have a problem when it is my report.
You have walked in on.
What is the problem?
None of your business, pal.
How would you respond to Adam?
You are being extremely rude. Oh, you are being extremely rude.
Why is everyone so nosy around here? Why don't you take a hike?
How would you
Would you like me to leave?
Actually, I think you should stay. I would like a third party to be present.
What is your response?
Let's stop arguing. Okay, so you can see here, it has not only my time to complete the simulation, which had 23-ish seconds where they were going through the introduction, but once I was given the opportunity to come to a resolution, it only took me about 29. My performance notes of information for the user is present, and this is the first time I've actually completed the simulation after I finished my edits to it. So yeah, that's how that functions. That does resolve or finish what I planned on teaching here based off of the scenario. If there are any questions or any resolutions that or you would like me to help you with in helping debug any situations you have or any further information you would like me to cover, I'm available to answer those questions now. But thank you.
I'll wait till the end and let everyone else go first.
Sure.
Are you just going to email this the video of the recording to everyone?
Yes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload it to our YouTube channel under an unlisted video, and I will send that out to everyone that was initially invited to this meeting.
Okay, and then do you have like video tutorials on this, like for each individual step as well?
Yes, if you go to, I didn't mean to click that. If you go to our YouTube channel, Sim Insight, just right here, under the playlists, or one of the first things you can find here is the introductory training videos, where I go through all of this somewhat in more detail for each individual state action I outline here, as well as how to create them and how all triggers and functionalities work. But I have a video tutorial system breaking this down for both intermediate, or for the introductory, which is what we covered today, intermediate, and other functionalities that would be helpful to new users of our system.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Let's go to the actual page. So if you go to playlists, you can see here how to, or various things here. So yeah, as well as all of our general videos that are outlining all of our other projects and everything else that's going on.
Great, well, thanks for teaching. I'm going to hop off now if we're done. I look forward to playing around with this. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Question, I guess, is there any type of tools for cleaning up like the scene flow? So if you had a bunch of nodes where it just shows you them all in a line?
Not currently. That'd be a little bit hard to define too from a system perspective, in case you ordered them differently too.
Are there also, and I guess my last question before I stop asking questions, is there a way to add annotations to like your scene flow? So let's say you have a group of states that are one part of the conversation, another group of state that are other parts of the conversation. That way you can keep track of them. I'm trying to think of what the, like a comments section, like a, you can box and comment or something like that. I don't know what your equivalent would be.
Yeah. So the best thing you have to help you with that is the naming of the states themselves. So conversation 1 kind of thing. Otherwise, currently no, that is not. I know what you're talking about. So that would be like putting it like within this environment itself, to where if this was a larger thing, I could put a comment and draw a box. Like all of these are the conversations that you're having between stuff, for example. We don't currently have that functionality. But you are able to add things like this if you wanted to. And you are able to comment on what these are. So you're able to label each of these. Any other questions? All right then. Troy, you had specific issues that you're running into with your system. Now seems like a good time to help you try to resolve them.
Okay, thanks. And this is probably just. And by the way, I really like your software. It's pretty intuitive and easy to use. It looks like other things that I've used like this, so I like that. And let me. So, should I just share my screen? Hold on a second.
Absolutely. If you'd like, you could also share it with my account directly. That way I could look at it from my screen, but I'm hoping that I should be able to guide you from you just sharing your screen.
Oh yeah, me too. It's probably just a button I'm not seeing. So when you can see my interface, right?
Mm-hmm. You've added
Okay.
a proximity.
Yeah. So if I delete this and I load it, this will initiate and function.
Correct.
Right. But when this is here and I launch it, it doesn't work. And my guess is that this is broken in some way, and so it's tripping this up maybe. But the idea is that when they get near the doctor, because I tell them to go find the doctor, they walk over to the doctor, and then it would trigger this next sequence.
Mm-hmm.
So,
would you mind?
But,
so, are you saying that the display message just straight up does not appear when you do this, or does
yeah, this does not work. If I delete this, it will work. So having this here seems to prevent this from working.
Okay.
And that's my guess is I probably just have something. I probably did it incorrectly, and it's making it trip up a little bit maybe.
Interesting. I will try and reproduce that right now and see if it is indeed you or if it is.
It's probably me.
Dr. Arnold, player, you did 0.1, which is awfully close, I will be honest.
Yeah, I don't know how much is a meter, so I played it safe because I didn't want to spawn. My other concern is that if I spawn too close to him, it would mess that up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, see, so when I launch, you can see it didn't do the thing. But if I
have an idea.
Quit,
and I'm sorry about this, that the system let you do this. When you get back to it, I'll request you to change something in your system because I just tried it and it functioned for me, but there's no way you could have possibly known this. So go to your scenario flow, click on the proximity, hit the drop down for entity type A, make that a virtual object, make that Dr. Arnold.
Oh, and then this needs to be player.
And make that one player.
Okay, cool.
Entity type B. You have to hit the drop down for that to make it player. And just make your distance a little bit larger. I couldn't trigger it at 0.1. And there you go.
Should I try 1?
Sure.
I don't know how much a meter is in that environment.
A meter is 1.
Thank you. That clarifies things.
Yeah.
But this is a cool tool. I'm excited to start messing around with this because this seems pretty user friendly and yeah, there we go. Cool, it triggered.
Okay.
Excellent.
I don't know. Well, I have a guess why it's like that, but okay. So now if you go and approach your doctor by using W, A, and D, when you get within a certain distance of him, it should move forward. Is that your Dr.?
There we go. Yeah, you're right. Even 1 meter seems pretty cool. All right, cool. It works.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent.
Excellent. Thank you.
So yeah.
Yeah, this is fun. I like this.
Yeah, if you don't like, again, it's saying blue dress Mary _ light 1, you're able to rename them so that the talking individual has their name or whatever you want to rename them as. So I just renamed mine Mary and Adam. It's just mostly useful for that. But yeah, there you go. I'm sorry that the entity type A lets you select player even though it messes it up. I was not aware of that. We will address
So
that.
there's like there's a default priority, and it needs to be virtual objects go on top of the player or something, or like that's like a hierarchy that needs to exist.
Apparently.
Okay.
I've just always done it that way and never tried it the other way. And
Because in my mind, the player takes the higher prior, is the top of the food chain. But I guess the virtual object makes sense.
Yeah, it should work both ways. That it doesn't is an error, and we'll address it. Thank you. Unfortunately, I train all of our authors within our company, and they do it the same way I've taught them, and you as a new user discovered a way that I just never thought to try. But it absolutely should function that way. So, yeah. We'll have them address that immediately. Thank you.
But yeah, this is cool. I have lots of suggestions, but the number one, as someone mentioned, is the undo. I think that's I personally think that's priority one, just because it's too easy to touch something by mistake and then you have to redo it. So I think that's like the highest quality of life feature that I personally see within the. But granted, I've only been using this for 30 minutes, so.
I understand. Thank you for your feedback. We will attempt to address it as quickly as we can. Undo is certainly within our feature set. We're aware that it's missing. It's just undo covers a lot of things that you can do.
Yep. Every single action.
Yeah. It's like, was it a movement thing? Was it a selection thing? Was it a rename thing? Was it a deletion? Who knows? So yeah. Thank you.
I have one last question to ask, and I
Absolutely.
just remembered it now. How many instance? I'm trying to think. Instance. I guess. How many saves can you have? Like how many saves can I roll back a save? I guess should be my first question.
You absolutely can. I will go back to sharing my screen. So,
And then my second question would be the number of rollbacks.
I don't know. I have had 7 pages of this, and it was fine. I don't know the limit. If that is important to you to know, I can forward your question to our backend developer, Douglas Choi, who should be able to answer that question. But the way to get there is you hit save, and there's this recover save button. And that shows you when you saved and who did it in case you're sharing your account. I'm sorry, not sharing your account, have shared the sim. So you can see who made the edit. And you can recover it by just clicking it and then hitting recover. I'll quickly demonstrate what I mean about the sharing bit by going into my editor bit here and sharing it with a different account of mine. Okay, and then if I log out, and then log back in, okay, there it is. I suddenly decided that I need to have this drawer in here. There's a difference now, and if I hit save, just here, and now if I go to recover save, you can see that I have an entry here from Chris's Sim Insights versus my training ones. Now if I go, nah, I don't like that anymore, I can hit recover, and it's going to reload all the assets and put me back into the state of the simulation where I had not added my drawer. So It would cover more than just assets, obviously. It would include the scenario flow and everything else. But that is the behavior that you're able to go through. So yeah. I'm going to go back to my training account. Is there any other questions? I misspelled training. All right. I'm going to stop the recording now.